Really, I mean, he needed a step ladder to get some of those notes. He really did.
Yeah.
And it's bizarre because it's not like it's somebody else's song. He's decided.
Hey, everybody out there. Welcome back to another Friday episode of the Audiophiles. And on Fridays, the shows are dedicated to songs that you guys offer us up to listen to. And today, John and I sat down, crunched the numbers, ran through the spreadsheet, determined who would do what. And John is going to go off and give a listen to a band that was offered up by P Eater 1 on the Candy Skin by the Fire Engines on our video dedicated to that band, that song.
Candy skin, oh, candy skin.
There you go. John remembers. But the track, the band in the track that was offered up by Mr. P Eater or Mrs. P Eater, I guess anyone can eat a pea, right? Was was the band Wild Swans and their track No Bleeding. And I believe this is from a John Peel session. I don't believe I actually know. So how familiar can you tell us, myself and the audience, are you with Wild Swans and their oeuvre?
I know of them, and they're all messed up within that Liverpool bundle. And I know it came out of Teardrop Explodes, and I know they've got some link with the Bunnymen. That's as bad. Oh, and Brody as well. And that's, like it says, that's as much like, but it's all a bit of a, as it was, when we talk about the Crucial Three with, Pope and McCulloch and P. Wiley, there was a lot of that stuff going around. I think they were all mates and things in that scene at Eric's club. But I don't know of them, and I haven't heard any Wild Swans. I just know they are made up of parts and had people in them that were in other stuff.
Cool. All right.
So this will be interesting.
You've done some of my research for me. But yes,
go vaguely, very vaguely.
About a half a line or two, I think I could maybe scratch off. But yes, I'm even less familiar. But full disclosure, I've given the song a listen, done some research on the band and the players in it and the song itself. But John, you are going to go off and give it sort of your maiden voyage. Go do that and come back and let P. Eater and the rest of us know what you made of this suggestion.
Okay, they're not in a hurry. It's very nice. Sounds lovely. You've got this nice sort of almost soft picking guitar. And I can see from the date at the top when it was. That sounds of its time. And you've got a lovely piano and then these synths, and it's just given this wide, sweeping feel to it. You feel like there's a big sky involved in this. And it sounds open and free almost. And it isn't quite, but it's ready to be uplifting. It's almost the start of something like I know, when those crappy TV movies about someone who overcomes all the odds, like being born with 4 heads or something, and becomes an Olympic champion. It's kind of that sort of music. But yeah, sounds good. And they're certainly in no hurry.
ice in my glass, head under covers, so awesome ago. Oh, boy, you suffer, faint heart, thirsty soul. Spirit's broken and your hope for it is gone. You tell your sorrow to a bottle, scraping barrel that you find. 'Cause the woman that conceived you can well be so unkind. To a boy with ambition lost and drinking heavily, braving cheers and glad derision on the harsh and foaming sea. Tell your sorrow to a bottle, scrape each barrel that you find. 'Cause the woman that conceived you can well be so unkind. To a boy with ambition lost and drinking heavenly, braving.
I do want to stop, but he seems to be just going round and round in a circle. Um, yeah, there's some really interesting. So it was really nice. It built. You got that sort of hi hat action, and then it kicked into the drum fill. You know, there's a bit of guitar urgency, and then the drum fill all the way. He's got one of those voices. It's earnest. It's a bit. And I'm not technical with it, but it sounds a bit heady. And he's definitely full of ambition for some of those notes. I think getting the better of him, to be fair, but I don't mind that at all. That kind of again feels quite endearing. But yeah, he feels very earnest, but limited. I was catching the lyrics because he's really rattling through, so it's hard. But he has repeated a couple of like verses or stanzas, we will call them. And there's lots of allusions to booze. Something about at the start, it was black clouds approaching, which is a nice opening line. There's something about courage melting like the ice in my glass, which I thought was quite nice. Then something about lost the will to carry on. Wretched spirit broken. Tell your sorrows to a bottle and scrape every barrel. There's something about the world be so unkind to a boy with ambition, lost and drinking heavily. So yeah, it feels like one of those uplifting kind of songs, which actually probably isn't. It's someone who sounds like their dreams aren't quite, boy with ambition, their dreams aren't quite made it, and they're hitting the source instead. But yeah, it's entertaining. Let's see how it goes.
Cheers and sad derision on a harsh and foaming sea. Tell your sorrow to a bottle, scrape each barrel that you find. 'Cause the woman that conceived you can well be so unkind. To a boy with ambition lost and thinking heavenly, braving cheers and sad derision on a harsh and foaming sea. Tell your sorrow to a bottle, scrape
That was a really nice ending, that. Yeah, so it's kind of like a non-stop, just feels kind of swirling a little bit, the way it keeps going round in the same sort of verse. There's a lot of repetition in some of those things I picked out. But it feels like all the time like it's lifting you up, even though the message may not be that. Um, Guitars are really nice, that sort of peaky, almost jangly. Um, the drums did a great job. It's a couple of nice fills, but I think it's that 80s production that even if they didn't mean to, it kind of makes a lot of drums sound synthetic, even when they're not. They're moving towards that drum machine sound. I think it sounded like a real person drumming. Um, and that piano at the end was lovely. It's got a bit of that sort of like that echoey piano just on its own, sort of has a bit of power and soul to it and almost defiance. Um, but it also feels like a bit of an elegy to the song that's just passed. It feels like we kind of witnessed this thing come and rise up on the thermals and off and away. And you're left in a sort of echoing hall with just a single piano. Yeah, some really nice, interesting stuff there. Um, I, we'll have to get more details from Andy. I've got some ideas about wild swans and stuff, but I need I need the truth and nothing but the truth. And to do that, we'll have to go back and talk with Andy.
All right, so you are back.
Hmm.
Hopefully you stopped the bleeding. What'd you make of this track, man?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. It's definitely. I mean, people say it's like a bad thing, but you can say it's dated or whether it's time. But it did sound of the era. So it
Mhm.
opens with this really nice piano chord, and you got this lovely guitar. You get the odd, really for me, my ears, all I hear was this like placeholder bass notes and some sort of ticking, percussion that's very sort of, at the start, just functional. I can see the date from the title on the top. So 82. And the guitar does sound of its time, but it's that sort of soft picked. I just imagine big felt pads, some reason
Mhm.
involved where there's that sound. And then you have this synth with these chords, and we said this ad infinitum, these wide open chords, makes the whole song sound wide and free at the start. And there's like in my mind's eye, there's a big sky involved in the scenario. And but it does also sound for the first, minute or so, like it's coiled. It's not quite there, but it's ready to spring into this uplifting sound song. This could easily be the title track to an opening to a true story TV movie about someone overcoming the odds or some affliction they were born with to become Olympic champion.
Right,
I think I
right.
said somebody born with four heads in the reaction. I don't know why I said that, but who then becomes ping pong champion or something. But I can easily imagine this, that start, and they're certainly not in any hurry. Wild swans, I mean, lazy swans, honestly. So we get around, a few bars, and we get like a couple of drum hits that are just teasers. And then it goes around again. There goes around again. And then about the minute mark, I mean, it's building atmosphere, bless him. But considering the context of how this was done, I think this is amazing. But so, yeah, around the minute mark, the singer arrives. He hardly comes galloping up, but he arrives. And there's a great opening line. It says, I think it's black clouds approaching, which is it's almost like a classic short story opening, just set the scene with the 3 words sort of thing. And then I didn't catch all the words he said, and the words are clearly important in this song. But it's something about my courage melting like the ice in my glass, which I think is a really nice line. The singer, so his voice is earnest and believable. If a little, and I'm not great at the technical stuff, for me it sounded a bit heady, his voice, like it's coming up through the top of his head. Um,
Mhm.
and it's not without limitations. And I have to say, some of those high notes may have been a touch beyond him. But I still find that kind of endearing in a
Yeah, yeah,
way, because he wasn't really. I mean, he needed a step ladder to get some of those notes. He really did.
yeah.
And it's bizarre because it's not like it's somebody else's song. He's decided. It's just, I found that really funny.
Yeah.
If you're just doing karaoke, you can't, hit the big bits of Mac the Knife. And fair enough, you shouldn't have chosen the bastard, but it's funny. But when it's your own song that you've written and you still can't reach the notes, that's just.
Yeah.
But I just found that endearing. I really did. It did put me off. He rattles through the lines, and so I only picked up some of it, but there was repeated lines in it. So, and musically, there's not really a chorus; it's more of a repeated section, and there's just slight shifts in the way the guitar is working and the percussion, like the hi-hat comes in for a bit. There's a little cameo guitar part, and then around 140, there's a really nice drum fill that leads into the song at full tilt, as it were, as it continues towards the end. And then we get this repeated bit. So there's bits that I picked up, not necessarily in order here, but something about when you're lost the will to carry on, wretched, spirits broken, tell your sorrows to a bottle, scrape each barrel. And then there's something else. And then it's can the world be so unkind to a boy with ambition lost and drinking heavily. Anyway, so this kind of repeats quite a bit. The circular pattern is the main body of the song. So we get this idea, or I get this idea from this, that, there's a lot of, I remember back to the opening bit with the melting, like the ice in his glass. So there's a lot of references to booze in this.
Mm-hmm.
So you get the idea, especially that line, I think, to a boy with ambition lost and drinking heavy already seems like a really important line. But you get this overall feeling that, there's someone with dreams and they're not quite working out. And so they're hitting the source, as it were. Which again is interesting because musically the song feels uplifting. It's kind of spiraling on itself, ever rising upwards. And you get a few decent drum fills. And I will say, with that 80s production values, I'm sure they didn't do it deliberately, but loads and loads of songs like this, it made the drums sound synthetic, even when they're not. And this had the case with this, and I'm convinced it's a real drummer, but it had that boo 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 sound to it almost, like hitting those horrible hexagon pads that they used to use are bloody awful. So anyway, it kind of climaxes, and then it ends with this gorgeous piano.
Yeah.
And it's striking this resounding pose with a sort of mini elegy for the song that's just passed. And there's some defiance and strength, but also like a marking of something that's past. So what I sort of thought, and I said in the reaction was, it was kind of like we were witnessing this song passing us by, almost riding the thermals as it's rising up and away and going off and into the distance or whatever. And we're left in this sort of empty hall or chamber with just this echo and piano as a kind of remembrance of what we've heard. I found it really poignant, that piano at the end. Very touching almost.
Yeah.
And it's just strange, I suppose the comment just hit me like that. And I just remember that these bands, when they did Peel sessions, usually at Maida Vale Studios, I believe, and they would do 3 or 4 songs in less than a day. So, time-wise, they're pretty tight.
Yeah.
And a lot of these bands, I don't know what the Wild Swans were like at this point. 82, I'm guessing, would have been really quite early in their career. I don't know how studio savvy they were. So I would think putting this track together would have been at the ambitious end of the spectrum of what most bands were doing for the sessions. So hats off to them. It's not without fault, don't get me wrong. And as I say, you can call it dated or of its time. I don't see it being dated as being, derogatory in any way. I just it's a snapshot of what things sounded like then. But overall, despite the sort of content, which I probably only got a quarter of, I found it really uplifting and glorious and ambitious and very much of its day. And yeah, it was quite a treat, actually, to listen to something like that, which I hadn't heard before of that time.
Yeah.
It's just really cool. I mean, it's not like the greatest song we'll ever listen to on the channel or anything, but for that 5 minutes or so, it kind of made my day listening to it. It was great.
Yeah. I think some of the things you pointed out on both ends of the spectrum stood out to me in the same vein. So the sort of the tones and the cascading nature of the guitar was lovely,
Yeah,
and the
yeah,
piano was incredible. I loved the sound of that as well. I did struggle a little bit with the vocals and how they came across at times, not blanketly, but there were
yeah,
times
yeah.
like, ooh. And you're right about the drums as well, sort of how they were produced or how they were recorded and captured. You know, sort of like when you're like, oh, don't take a picture of me from that angle, get me from over here. The drums could have used to be recorded from a different angle, if you will. So yeah, I kind of picked up on that as well. But that I don't think that takes away anything. If anything, it underscores some of the stuff that you had mentioned. If you apply that much thought to it and you don't just dismiss it, you're like, oh, this is a peel session. This was probably done in one day, or really, this track was probably done in a fraction of whatever that
Like
one day
two
window
hours,
was, right? That they
probably.
had to work with it exactly. So you actually have to tip your cap by the time you get to the finished product when you take all of those things into consideration. And yeah, I found it to be overall a pretty enjoyable song myself. I was not familiar with these guys, as I mentioned. You have more of an inkling about not only this band, but the bands that came before it or that had members, that would go on to create this band, and bands that came after this that were splinters of what this band was as well. I'm sure than I did, but I've said this before, and I'll say it again. It's fun to do this research on stuff that I'm
Yeah,
not familiar with because it's kind of a learning experience. And sometimes you stumble across shit where you're like, holy shit, I know about this band or this guy. I didn't know that they were affiliated with it. So it's really fun and cool to be able to sit down and do that. And I had a lot of fun doing it for Wild Swans, who are a post-punk band from, as you mentioned, Liverpool. And they formed in 1980, shortly after Paul Simpson left the Teardrop Explodes. The band's personnel has been subject to regular turnover, however, with the vocalist, the aforementioned Simpson, being the only constant member throughout all of the turnover that they've gone through. The lineup on the compilation album Incandescent, on which this track features, was Paul Simpson, vocals, guitar, Gerard Quinn on keyboard, Jeremy Kelly on guitar, and this is where we start to see a lot of that turnover because, again, a compilation, they're pulling from different parts of their history. So we've got several names attributed to bass and drums. James Weston, Joe Fearon, Phil Lucking, and Rollo McGinty, all bass on varying tracks. Yes, I knew that name would sound familiar to you. It was
oh,
from yeah.
Boomtops.
Then we have Alan Wills, you might have to help me with this one. Joe McKechnie. Uh, is that okay? McKechnie sounds right to me.
That sounds fine.
Yeah, thank you. Justin Stavley or Stavely, and Pete DeFreitas, all were drums on varying tracks on this. Maybe I know this, maybe I don't. Pete DeFreitas, should I know that
Echo the
name?
Bunnyman.
Echo and the Bunnymen drummer. Okay, excellent. And that also makes sense because of what you alluded to earlier, and there being some like synergy between Echo and the Bunnymen and these guys. The
They're
original,
all mates. They're all
yeah,
mates, and they all met
exactly,
at Eric's pub. Falling
exactly.
in and out of bands as before they made it in various guises.
There's a lot of maybe it's because it's such a close knit family, just music making and just the in your aisles over there. But there's this sort of like incestuousness to the to turnover in bands and oh, I was in this act or oh, I toured with them because they were my friends and we were contemporaries. You see that a lot more in this English rock music than you do in American rock music, I think. And it's probably just because
Yeah,
of the population density and the swath of land that is east to west coast over here, and everything over there is much more tight knit, it would seem.
yeah. I think it doesn't happen so much now because everything is so available. You put
Yeah,
stuff out online. It doesn't matter where you come from. You can
yeah,
come from Kentish Town or Kathmandu. Your
yeah.
sound's out there.
It's
But
globalized,
I mean,
like everything.
yeah. But back in the day, particularly, it used to be important where bands came from.
Mm,
So you'd have the Liverpool sound of your era, let alone the Liverpool sound of my parents' era.
yeah.
And the same with the Sheffield sound was a
And the
big thing.
Manchester sound and coming from Manchester.
Yeah, again, yeah, exactly. And yeah, I mean, particularly when music was more tribal, So you picked your tribe, and that was your thing. And movements were quite often quite geographical as well as musical. So you
Yeah.
would get like the New Romantics came out of Birmingham, which is same place as Ozzy and Led Zeppelin came
Yeah.
out. It's just bizarre, but yeah, they did, yeah, and goes on from there.
It's interesting because people think about tribalism and it's like instantly like, ugh, but there for whatever shreds of charm can be taken from the concept of tribalism, you guys seem to really know those shreds and hone them and harness them well, whether it's through
Yeah,
music or your sporting allegiances or even the differences in accents from one place to a half hour, west of
yeah.
there. It's really interesting how, and I know time is part of that and it preserves that and it helps you hone that, but it's really interesting how you guys do that and it doesn't become so toxic as you see in other places.
Yeah, I mean the sporting one was toxic in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, with the
Terribly. I
hooligans
mean,
and
it's
everything,
massive.
right? Right,
Yeah,
right.
but musically, I mean, something like Two Tone out of Coventry, that was a matter of pride, I think, for their sort of the racial mixture and makeup and blending, which was happening in certain towns and cities like Coventry.
Hmm.
And yeah, it was a matter of, and I think there's an awful lot of pride in the bands from Liverpool.
Yeah.
When that's probably will stem from the Mersey sound from the 60s, and they got their big shoes to fill. Even if you take the Beatles out of the equation, the other bands as well. And so these bands that came through, late 70s, early 80s, that Liverpool sound as well, had their own pride and wanted to be as good as their,
Yeah.
people who came before them. And
But
I think it's really
it's
cool.
it is cool, and it's a thin line you have to toe where your pride doesn't diminish the pride of others or step on other people in order to show off that pride. And
Yeah,
I've noticed that line never gets crossed or rarely gets crossed, and that's admirable. I think coming from a place where it's so easy, everything's so easily
yeah.
divisive and things like that. So anyway, done with that diatribe, but an interesting observation there. So yeah, the original incarnation of the Wild Swans lasted until 1982, not very long, just issuing one single. And a reconstituted version of the band issued two albums from 88 to 90. Again, just kind of like a 2 year window. That seems to be all they could really perpetuate before they kind of dissolve. And in 2009, Simpson put a new lineup together, and the group played numerous dates, issuing a new studio album in 2011. And the Wild Swans are also spun off of two charting splinter projects, Care and the Lotus Eaters. Members of the Wild Swans have also been members of Echo and the Bunnymen, the Icicle Works, the Wooden Tops, which you mentioned a moment ago, the Brian Jonestown Massacre, and the Lightning Seeds. Many of those names have come up or have had, whole episodes dedicated to them on this channel. So it's nice to kind of almost fill in all of these gaps that we have accumulated over time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they formed in 80 when Simpson, who had left the Teardrop Explodes after recording their first single, teamed up on vocals with Jeremy Kelly guitar, Jed Quinn on keyboards, and James Weston on bass, and Justin Stavely on drums. An opportunity arose when Pete DeFreitas of Echo and the Bunnymen, an old friend and flatmate of Simpson's, agreed to fund their first single, "The Revolutionary Spirit," which came out in 1982 on Zoo Records. Stavely had dropped out of the band, so DeFreitas ended up becoming the financier, drummer, and producer for the single. He was credited under his middle names, Louis Vincent. The first single spent 9 weeks on the UK independent chart, peaking at number 13. Despite turning out to be Zoo's last ever release, the single received a measure of critical acclaim and in time developed cult status. Subsequent to the release of The Revolutionary Spirit, weekly rehearsals were given a degree of urgency when the band was offered a BBC Radio 1 John Peel session. So, kind of underscores that whole like, shit, we got to get everything organized and together. We just got invited to a big gig. So songs in the session, all written by the team of Simpson, Quinn, and Kelly, included "No Bleeding," "Enchanted," and "Thirst." By this point, the band was rounded out by two members, Baz Hughes on bass, and Joe McKechnie on drums. Sorry, I'm going to edit that. The pop-up was taking up the screen and distracting me. So we have 10 minutes, just so you know. The Wild Swans were sporadically active in the early 1980s, touring with Echo and the Bunnymen, which probably comes as no surprise. In 1981, following a residency with The Teardrop Explodes. A David Jensen session came in spring of 1982 with the band penning and performing The Iron Bed, Flowers of England, and Now You're Perfect. The group was split very soon after this BBC One radio session was broadcast. So these guys just can't stick together for very long. In 1986, the session recorded for the Radio 1 John Peel show was finally released on Strange Fruit Records, containing the tracks No Bleeding, Enchanted, and Thirst. It repeated the single success, peaking at number 13 again on the independent chart. Shortly thereafter, Simpson, Kelly, and Quinn got together and began playing once again as the Wild Swans. By 1988, Quinn had dropped out. Simpson and Kelly were joined on bass by Joe Fearon, and a long-awaited debut album finally emerged. Titled Bringing Home the Ashes, and featured the uncredited session players on keyboards and drums, it was produced by Paul Hardiman and yielded 2 singles, Young Manhood and Bible Dreams. Simpson is nowadays disparaging of the sound developed on that album and feels that some of the aura and magic surrounding the Wild Swans had been lost. So I guess over time he grew to not be such a fan of this work. A second album on Sire Space Flower was released in 1990, but the Wild Swans split up shortly after Space Flower was released. And in 2003, a retrospective collection of the rare Wild Swans recordings was compiled and released by Renaissance Records. Incandescent is a double album containing material from 1981 to 1987, but mostly from the band's earliest period. It includes the Peel, Jensen, and Long sessions, as well as a number of live songs, demos, and alternative versions. And accompanying booklet featured the biographical information on the band and detailed track-by-track commentary from Simpson himself. So let's jump into these lyrics. Black clouds approaching. Once my metal held fast. Now my courage is melting with the ice in my glass. Head under covers, so awesome a goal. Poor boy, you suffer. Faint heart, thirsty soul. And that's also interesting, thirsty soul. And it seems to be with alcohol, right? Another allusion to consumption of liquids. When you've lost the will to carry on, when your wretched spirit's broken and all hope of it is gone, do you tell your sorrows to a bottle? Scrape each barrel that you find. Again, barrel, bottles. Curse the woman that conceived you. Can the world be so unkind? To a boy with ambition, lost and drinking heavily, braving jeers of glad derision on a harsh and foaming sea. Do you tell your sorrows to a bottle? Damn, even the foaming sea is like a sea of beer that you've just thrown yourself into. I'm loving that. I could use beer. Do you tell your sorrows to a bottle? Scrape each barrel that you find. Curse the woman that conceived you. Can the world be so unkind? To a boy with ambition, lost in drinking heavily, braving jeers of sad derision on a harsh and foaming sea. Do you tell your sorrows to a bottle? Scrape each barrel that you find. Curse the woman that conceived you. Can the world be so unkind? To a boy with ambition, lost in thinking heavily, braving jeers of sad derision on a harsh and foaming sea. Do you tell your sorrows to a bottle? Scrape each barrel that you find. Curse the woman that conceived you. Can the world be so unkind? To a boy. Interesting stuff. And yeah, now that I really pour over these, I'm definitely picking up on all of this. He's definitely self-medicating with the old sauce. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, man, I enjoyed this tune. I think I enjoyed it enough But then when I go over these lyrics with you and hear your perspective on it and kind of pour over what I've learned throughout the history of the band, there's more interest peaked than I would have having just heard the song alone, which again, part of the joy of doing this channel and doing these songs. It
It's
kind
the
of fast
context,
tracks
isn't it?
you. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, Pea Eater, thank you so much for offering up this track. And John, thank you for giving it a listening and telling everybody your thoughts.
Pleasure.
Yeah, this was a great song. Guys out there in the listening audience, let us know what you make of this tune and this band. And if there's any other suggestions we should check out, either by them or by anybody else, Liverpool or Timbuktu or Kathmandu, whatever. Give us a band and we will gladly check it out on our Friday episodes. We will add it to the list. Also, please, while I have your attention, please think about liking, sharing, and or subscribing. Any and all of those things go a long way to kind of help push us out into the YouTube algorithm matrix and help us appear on more people's landing pages, gets more people into the fold, maybe means more music coming out on our channel and better suggestions that we can go check out. All of it is tied together, and we can't do this channel without you guys, so we really, really do appreciate you very much. All that out of the way, hopefully John and I will see all y'all in growing numbers on the next installment of the Audiophiles. We'll see you later, guys. Have a great weekend.